Yo, what's up, Mr. Ike, and other people viewing this? This is my video essay about The Little Prince and why it's super cool. As Ellison McLean once put it, John, can I borrow your flash drive? I need to download a personality. This, of course, is in reference to my tendency to adopt traits from media I've consumed. Most notoriously is my integration of Camus' The Stranger and Antoine de Saint-Exupéry's The Little Prince into my being, as mentioned in my written discourse. Flogging the Plague and Praising the Stranger, I believe The Stranger to be the second best book ever written. It used to occupy the first place. It was usurped by The Little Prince, which has now been granted the title of peak fiction. I was totally immersed within the silly little presentation of the philosophy of Mysterious Little Prince in a neat, concise mastery of the French language. Much like The Stranger, I have made great efforts to buy and spread the teachings of this little book. I first purchased an edition in English from Amazon in hopes that my mother would read it and perhaps pick up some new vocabulary. She did not touch it, and instead elected to listen to the audiobook in Spanish. In giving it new use, I read the book myself and found certain peculiarities in the translation. The subtle changes undergone from French to English are gone unnoticed by the average reader. This is because the original meaning is still retained. However, that minuscule, nuanced choice of translation was not lost on me. This state-mandated video essay will first compare translations of the universally regarded statement of the 21st chapter. Afterwards, as a result of the silly and goofy nature of this final essay, I will compare the universal themes of The Little Prince to my favorite incel-type movies. As mentioned previously, the specific word choice in a translation, despite varying in quality, will retain the same meaning. The only difference is in the impact of the delivery, which I believe to be the most essential in writing. Therefore, translations ought to be regarded in how effective they are in conveying the authorial intent of a given line. The most egregious instance of this principle that I can recall is a translation of the title of a popular manga. A fan-made production by non-English speakers entitled the manga as Diamond Is Not Crash. When serialized more professionally, it was given the title of Diamond is Unbreakable. While the original is neither as eloquent nor grammatically correct as the latter translation of the title, the same rough idea is conveyed. Both express the same subject, the diamond, and similar adjectives, unbreakable and an uncrashed object. This principle in translation is what causes the differences between translations of The Little Prince to go largely unnoticed. The two contenders will be the original by Catherine Woods and the more readily available version on Amazon by Richard Howard. Chapter 21 of The Little Prince has been described by Madame Zimmerman as arguably the most important. After all, it is the quotes in this chapter that are most commonly used in tacky Facebook quotes. The chapter is a continuation of the Little Prince's lonely journey to find friends. In the prior chapter, he comes to the realization that his rose is no different from the thousands of roses he finds in a garden. This apparent insignificance brings him to weep. The chapter picks up from his lamentations and introduces a pivotal fox. Over the course of their friendship, the fox shares his wisdom with the Little Prince, particularly the need for relationships. His final piece of advice is the climax of the novel, as it is the point where the Little Prince decides on the theme of should I stay or should I go, the one that Mr. Ike likes to cite as the most evident conflict in any story. In the original French version, the fox tells the Little Prince, Voici mon secret. Il est très simple. On ne voit bien qu'avec le cœur. L'essentiel est invisible pour les yeux. What it translates to word for word, according to my 4 years of experience in French, is, here is my secret. It's very simple. One sees well only with the heart. What is essential is invisible to the eyes. Catherine Woods' translation takes a more loose interpretation that remains within the intent of the original in putting it as, and now here's my secret. A very simple secret. It is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye. Finally, the Richard Howard interpretation follows the original text more closely and translates it as, here is my secret. It's quite simple. One sees clearly only with the heart. Anything essential is invisible to the eyes. The principle of translation still applies in this case as well, because both translations still convey the same message in different terms. However, it appears that Catherine Woods more accurately delivers the same flow when read in French, and moreover, seems to be overall more effective. Admittedly, this is a fairly subjective comparison, but Howard's wording does not deliver the same punch, so to speak. By this, I mean that the anything essential phrasing dilutes the delivery of the phrase. The inclusion of the word anything is detrimental because it lacks a specific focus on what it is that is essential. Looking at both my word-for-word translation and Catherine Woods', the use of what is essential seems to be more accurate. It is more concise and directs the idea more appropriately. It's super nitpicky of me, but I feel that what is strengthens the phrasing of the sentence because it concretely establishes the everythingness of the invisibility of the essential. Anything lacks this in its wishy-washiness. This same idea applies to the previous sentence. It is here that Richard Howard translates on, which itself is a strange French pronoun that roughly translates to one or we, and he translates this directly. However, it is my firm belief that the use of the word one seems to fall under the category of words that have sterile uses, primarily when you're trying to avoid interpersonal pronouns when writing an essay for AP Lit. The choice to avoid a direct translation is a smart move for Catherine Woods. It is only with the heart gives it a more colorful wording to the sterile once he's well only with the heart. Now, you may be thinking, John, what the hell are you saying right now? And right. I completely get it. I'm being completely nitpicky. But I am right in doing so. My voice cracked. Anyways, when you translate a book as serious and stealing as The Little Prince, it behooves the translator to choose phrases that appropriately match this colorful little book. Normally, one would go to great lengths to compare entire paragraphs to see which translator has the biggest, most baddest, and accurate translation. But in this instance, perhaps the best translation is one that retains the original color, and the single most important sentence in the book suffices to show this. I find that Richard Howard's more or less misses that mark. This is not to say that it is a bad translation by any means. It just means that it is not the full effectiveness of the original novel because of the lost nuance. It's roughly 99% effective. The difference is negligible enough for someone who has not read it in French, or cannot, but it is distinguishable with the careful eye. As the fox said, what is essential is invisible to the eye. This matches the idea completely. Too long, didn't hear. Using one sentence, it is determined that Catherine Woods' translation of The Little Prince is more effective because it retains the coloring of the original French wording. Finally, the main course of this video essay. I went and rewatched what I could of Taxi Driver and Joker, and took them into proper AP Literature consideration. I will say that I had no problems rewatching Joker a second time. I could not rewatch Taxi Driver for the life of me. Some movies you can only see one time, and this is enough to satisfy a lifetime. Regardless, while I was watching The Little Prince, I couldn't help but think about the central theme of relationships. I know Mr. Ike compared analyzing The Little Prince to analyzing something like Dr. Seuss, but there's a certain literary mastery presented in this little novel that is so irresistible to me. I strongly recommend for you, Mr. Ike, to reread The Little Prince through those literary eyes of yours. I promise you won't be disappointed. As I mentioned before, the main idea of The Little Prince is its universal theme of what it means to be human. People need other people. This much is obvious. But it also goes further. Saint-Exupéry explains that it is the time that you spend with another person that makes that person special. It is not the inherently unique quality of another person that makes him special, but it is the experiences you share that links you both. It is these bonds that strengthen our souls, because, without our links to others, we lack the central human characteristic. The fox, before he was befriended, lived aimlessly. His existence was for the sole purpose of existing, and after creating a link with the Little Prince, his life finds some degree of purpose. It's this idea of mutual taming that makes someone special that is a beautiful central theme. Sure, it's not the intricate Camus saying nothing matters. There is a certain appreciation in the fundamental need for others that is so intriguing about the Little Prince. What is great about an exploration of what grounds man in reality is how ultimately universal Little Prince is. So, when I rewatched Joker and some of Taxi Driver, I couldn't help but link the three together. What was so uncanny is the fact that the protagonists lack meaningful connections with anyone. The protagonist's societal isolation eventually leads to their radicalization. For this reason, these movies are often associated with incels, because theirs is a radical community of tentative relationships. Arthur Fleck, the Joker, is an example of an unsatisfied human need. His is a story that demonstrates the human necessity to connect with others. Arthur begins the movie with a rudimentary support system provided by the city. However, as Gotham dwindles further into a recession, this outlet for Arthur is cut. Arthur's multifaceted isolation from the rest of society is explored throughout the movie as he fails to create meaningful relationships. Through his fantasies, it is shown that Arthur wishes to connect with others. He fantasizes being on the Murray Franklin show and meeting Murray because he craves interaction with others. Specifically, it is a fantasized version of Murray saying,
"Okay, we got a big show tonight. Stay tuned. We'll be right back."
That was great, Arthur. Thank you. I mean, I love to hear what you had to say. It made my day.
Thanks, Murray.
You see all this, the lights, the show, the audience, all that stuff. I'd give it all up in a heartbeat to have a kid like you.
Arthur wishes to be desired by another in some capacity and to be recognized. The shot of Arthur's fantasy uses bright and warm colors that signify the warmth of another person that he desires. When the shot cuts back to his reality of watching television, the scene returns to the movie's usual use of cool colors. This contrast signifies Arthur's reality plagued by lack of meaningful connections. Furthermore, as his stability dwindles, he hallucinates going out on dates with his neighbor, which are later revealed to have been products of his imagination. Again, like the Murray Franklin show fantasy, this shows Arthur's internal desire to be wanted by someone. The fantasized version of his neighbor confesses in admiration for Arthur's actions. Arthur desires to be noticed and to connect with someone. This loneliness is made worse with his tenuous connection with his mother, given she is generally unsupportive of his aspirations to be a comedian and her bouts of mental instability. As she puts it, "Don't you have to be funny to be a comedian?" In short, Arthur does not have anyone. Finally, Arthur's desire to be a comedian is not a haphazard choice. A comedian receives recognition for his role of making people laugh. Arthur, because of his medical condition, makes people uncomfortable and worsens his isolation. Therefore, his aspirations to become a comedian are indicative of showing Arthur's innermost desire. Ultimately, it is the flurry of his worsening mental illness and isolation that causes him to radicalize and go on a murder spree. Similarly, in Taxi Driver, the pattern of a radicalized loner is followed. Travis Bickle, the taxi driver, undergoes a similar progression of a lack of a meaningful support system and its consequences until he, spoiler alert, goes on a killing spree. Travis also does not have success in making lasting relationships, as he professes at the beginning of the movie.
Loneliness has followed me my whole life, everywhere. Bars and cars, sidewalks, stores, everywhere. There's no escape. I'm God's lonely man.
The film follows a gloomily shot progression of Travis's descent into cold-blooded murder, much like Joker. Travis's attempts at creating links with his love interest, Betsy, go awry because of Travis's social ineptitude. By social ineptitude, I mean taking her to a dirty film theater. What makes Travis's case spectacular by comparison is his inescapable vicious cycle. By this I mean that Travis is naturally a lonely man, which leads him to believe he is better than the people around him, because surely that is the reason why he has no one. And this causes him to be lonelier, which in turn continues the cycle until he reaches the point of going on a killing spree. Therefore, it is concluded from this that Travis and Arthur are similar archetypes of characters because of one defining characteristic: their absence of essential human bonds. As mentioned previously, people need to create links with other people. What is essential is invisible to the eye. It is applicable to both movies. The absence of these invisible links in Travis and Arthur's lives lead them to their breaking point. They do not have the building block that is so key to the human experience. They have not tamed anyone, and no one has tamed them. They are like the flowers in the garden the little prince finds, because they are all empty. They are all devoid of the defining human characteristic. The Little Prince's universal concept of what it means to be human is then why it is held in such high regard. The expression of the human condition is so fundamental, which is why movies that seemingly have nothing to do with it are somehow related. To conclude, The Little Prince is not to be readily discarded on the basis that it is a children's book. Looks can be deceiving, and not all that is essential is apparent to the eyes. It is meaningfully applicable to other media, which is a credit to how universal it is. So, this is why you should go on Amazon and look up The Little Prince on your little computer on Amazon and buy it for $6 because it is really good. And that is all for AP Lit. Let's go!